Thank you for joining us for this half hour, direct from the Ocean State, chapter and verse. We have part 2 with George Wiley Center in Pawtucket. Organizer, you're one of the top guys there. The Lord used you powerfully. Camilo Viveris.
Thank you for having me again.
It was a wonderful tape we saw last week. It was really compelling, and the people involved, they bring a face to the problem. They bring themselves, and when we look at them, we get a chance to see the problem in life, in 3 dimension.
I mean, if we really take the time to listen to each other and to really hear what people are going through, that's how change is made. So right now it's a very important time to get out the word. It's timely that people saw that video because part of the different results of that campaign, the Lifeline campaign, is that 7,000 people across the state of Rhode Island who are eligible to fill out a handicap or serious ill form to get those protections impacted need to fill out those forms before November 1st.
Yes.
So we really need to spread the word throughout the churches, community groups, anyone that you know that has a medical condition. It's important that their doctors fill out these forms, and they're new forms that have been out since May, and we really need, everyone to spread the word to family, relatives, friends, because on November 1st is the moratorium, but the moratorium on shutoffs only helps you if you're a protected category.
Yes.
And how you can get that category in place is by having these forms filled out. So if people have any questions, they can call us at the George Wiley Center. We're at 728-5555. That's 728-5555. And we also have monthly meetings of the Lifeline program. So some of the people in the video that was featured the first Wednesday of every month at the George Wiley Center, 32 East Avenue in Pawtucket.
Yeah.
We host a meeting at 6 o'clock. If people have problems with transportation, they can give us a call. We have a light dinner. If people need childcare, we try to make sure that people's needs are taken care of so we can really focus on the issues at hand.
Even transportation, need a ride?
Exactly. It's a big issue.
Free ride.
Of course,
Free dinner.
That's right.
And free childcare.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Yeah, we want to make sure because children are impacted, and we certainly don't want to keep people away because they don't have a babysitter, because they're a single parent. We want to really be welcoming. Like the video showed, kids are impacted by this. There was a young girl that, she jokingly said, I don't like daycare, but the reason why she was going to daycare was because the utilities were shut off, and the parent had to put the child in the daycare. And we had talked about in the last episode about the infant protection. But after you're 2 years old, that protection is no longer in place. So for people who have medical conditions, it's very, very important that between now and before November 1st, you get those papers filled out by your doctor. And if anyone needs help, they can come to a meeting. And please, if anyone's facing termination, if you get a shut-off notice and you're worried about getting shut off, really, that's what we're there for, is to let people know about your rights, let people know about these protections that we've organized to win, but often people can't exercise them if they don't know about them, right? So we get calls every day from people that think there's really no hope, there's nothing that they can do, and then we have the blessing to be able to tell people well, actually, you have a right to ask for a hearing, or you might have a medical protection. One of the things that people sometimes mistakenly think is that the medical protections only are, say, if somebody has severe asthma or COPD or is dependent on, say, insulin. But no, it's up to your doctor. It's up to your doctor to, you bring them the forms, and it's up to your doctor to fill them out. And people with mental health issues, I can't imagine if you're struggling through depression and you have your utilities shut off. That's a life-threatening situation. It is, So there's a lot of misinformation that people might have that before they even are able to benefit from the protections, they already disqualify themselves. So as a community, we hope people come to the Lifeline meetings and give us a call. And the Henry Shelton Act that we talked about last time, there's a new version that we actually got passed at the state legislature this year, and it's going to go into effect sometime before October 1st. So that's more good news. We mentioned how Henry Shelton, the founder of the George Wiley Center, we had legislation named after him, and it's the best payment plan. But like everything, nothing's perfect. And one of the elements that we never really liked about that plan was that it was written as a one-time only plan. So a lot of people went into default. And fortunately, this year, we went up to the State House and we had that changed. So for people who feel like, well, I had the Henry Shelton plan, I couldn't keep up, and I went into default, guess what? By October 1st, you can sign up for it again. And the way it's written this year is, and for the future, is if you miss 2 payments, instead of going into default, you have within a year to pay back those 2 bills to get back in the plan. So little by little, we look at our past victories. We bring people together and say, what's working, what isn't working, how can we improve this together? And that's another example. We really need people's feedback because one of the results of the lawsuit is that National Grid agreed to a lot of changes in their customer service practices, but the only way we know if what the lawyers agreed to is trickling down to what's happening on the ground is if people talk to us and they let us know. And we know it's an education process. Some of the workers that work for National Grid, they've had some training, and we're working with National Grid to try to improve the training, but there's a lot more work to be done. But the only way we can really make those improvements in the way that we need is if we ordinary people are our eyes and ears, and they come and they let us know, this was our experience, this is what we need changed. So when we talk to the lawyers and we go back to the judge, which is going to happen at the end of September, we'll be able to say, well, that's good that you agreed to do A, B, and C, but this is what's happening, right? This is the reality. This is what it looks like when people are trying to sign up to get the protections. Or one of the agreements they made is that if you have a medical condition, they need to negotiate with you and give you a chance to have a better payment plan. The video showed how people were not really given that opportunity, and we're finding that there's still a big gap. So about 50 people have been offered a better payment plan, but this is out of 7,000 people.
Yeah.
So we need, God bless you for opening the airwaves and letting people know. I'm confident that some of your viewers are going to find out this information, and it's going to help them, not be shut off. And so you're making a big difference, and it's really touching.
Thank you, Camila. You're a good guest.
Well, I really appreciate you doing this for others and educating people about how we can take care of each other.
Yeah, it's part of our Christian commitment. Love God and love fellow human beings.
So National Grid is one of the sponsors of the water fire. Water fire, it's terrific, huh?
I do. I like water fires. So that video came out of some interns at Brown University that were working with Keith Brown, who's a film professor there. And so they reached out to the Lifeline Project, which is a collaboration between the George Wiley Center and the Center for Justice. And I think they took some creative liberties at the end. I think they were trying to portray the contrast between, doing publicity and the reality of that there needs to be more corporate accountability, and we need to make sure that it's good that they sponsor philanthropic activities like that, but we also have to make sure that people can afford access. And it's kind of I think people would be shocked to think that folks like in the video, people that are reliant on oxygen, to breathe, people that are reliant on refrigeration for insulin are getting shut off. Because when you get your bills, you often have forms or you'll have a reference to protections. So that's what this Struggle the Lifeline project was all about, is that knowing the rules, we study the rules, and what the rules say, we knew that there was a gap. And people coming in, what they were experiences in the actual law.
Yeah.
And so fortunately, the Center for Justice listened to members of the George Wiley Center, who then courageously became plaintiffs. And we won. We won some victories. It's not over. We're going to have to monitor it, and we have more changes we want to make. But at least for 7,000 people, from May 1st until the end of September, they haven't had to be months without utilities, which I can tell you happened last year. There were people that, like Ramon, in the video, he had to go into the hospital. And like we had discussed before,
it's expensive.
Who pays for that? One night in the hospital.
Expensive.
So if somebody owes even $1,000, $2,000, it's the taxpayers that are, in essence, subsidizing the irresponsible practices. And we can do better. We can do better in our state. We can save the taxpayers money and have a more humane policy that allows for people to pay, like somebody like Ramon, to pay what he can, to live in dignity, to feel like, in his retirement, he talked about how he worked many different factory jobs.
Yes.
Maybe he wasn't paid a lot of money, but
probably not.
He has some dignity. Let people pay a reasonable amount.
Yeah.
And so one thing I wanted to talk about is something called a percentage income payment plan.
Yeah.
So this used to exist in Rhode Island. In fact, we were one of the states that had this plan first, Montana and Rhode Island. So it was a very
Wonderful,
cutting edge program. It started
Is that
in
like
work.
a sliding scale?
Exactly. So for low-income people, it is what it sounds like, a percentage income payment plan where you pay a percentage of your income.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, because if you give people a chance, people want to pay their bills. They want to pay. They want to feel responsible. They want to feel like they're contributing. Like Shane said in the video, people want to be constructive members of society, rather than subsidizing a truck to go and shut somebody off. And then guess what? National Grid's not getting a penny. While people are suffering, going into the hospital, their kids might be getting taken away from them. They could be going into foreclosure. If they're elderly, they could be
A whole chain of events.
Yeah, really. I mean, a lot of different, tearing families apart, and the unintended consequences that the taxpayers fund. So we're saying it's time to bring back the percentage income payment plan. It exists in a dozen other states throughout the country. And we're hoping the governor is going to take a leadership position in this. And also, there's 2 new appointees on some very important utility-related bodies in the state. So one is the new administrator at the Rhode Island Division of Public Utilities. So we're very hopeful that he comes from a background of policy issues. We're hopeful that he is going to take this on, because in other states like Ohio, New Jersey, and Nevada, the legislator and policymakers his colleagues in those states really advocated for this, right? And there's a new appointee on the Public Utilities Commission who we're also going to be meeting with. And so we're hoping that, now's the time when there has been in the last few years some rate increases, and this would be one way to protect those who are most vulnerable, to make sure that they're, instead of being shut off, that they have a more reasonable payment plan, and making sure that the funding continually comes in, right? That, and at the same time, the people with medical conditions, with children, elderly, disabled, unemployed, right, veterans. There are so many people that are really struggling. Every year, over 20,000 people get shut off in our state, which is, that's a lot of people. I mean, that's the size of almost a small town, and we're approaching the winter time, and all of us have experienced this, where if a tree falls down, we get a bad storm, and it becomes transparent how important electricity is. Yeah. And people complain about it, right?
Yeah.
If there's an outage for a day or two, so there's an invisible economic hurricane that exists in our state for 20,000 people, right? Households. That actually is households. So it could be 2 or 3 times that, depending on the size of the household that you're talking about. And if we are thinking, if we think about it, and then we open our hearts to really feel what would that feel like, what we experience maybe temporarily for a day or two, I think we wouldn't allow this to happen. And so that's what we're really hoping at the George Wiley Center, that we can bring the percentage income payment plan back to Rhode Island. It already was a statewide program. We're excited about making that change. And there's so many other issues that the community is affected by. So, we would love to focus on other issues, and have our policymakers, our political leaders take a leadership role, take the reins, and these proven solutions that can be done. And, so thank you really for being part of that discussion, because sometimes people don't know what they can do. They don't know that there are solutions that are out there that they can advocate for. And it makes people feel better, really. When somebody calls us sometimes or comes to a meeting, they can feel like a failure because they've tried their best, no fault to their own. They might have lost their job. They might have had an injury. They might have had a health situation that their wages have gone down. They may have gone into retirement. Many different issues result and become a perfect storm in somebody's life, where all of a sudden, sometimes the first time, they can't pay their bills. Next thing you know, they're shut off. And so when we explain the percentage income payment plan and how this problem doesn't need to happen, that we can solve it together, it's like a sigh of relief, and it changes how you view yourself, right? You become somebody that might be embarrassed by the problem that you're having, to somebody that now you can work together with others and try to make a positive change. So it's really an honor to be part of that work, a privilege to be part of that work. And it really is beautiful. It's a powerful thing, not just in that we're making policy change that it helps people. It I've seen people that never went to the State House, never spoke publicly. Their view of themselves changes. Is it inspiring to me? And that's what our work is about seeing in each other sometimes what we don't see in ourselves, that we need to be reminded when times are tough, that we can make a difference, that we're valuable, we have dignity, and affirming that together is basically the core of organizing. Everything else comes after that, right? If we come together as a group and respect and
Through
listen.
suffering.
Yeah, sometimes there's sacrifice, right? Putting other people. We were talking about how sometimes when getting somebody involved, they don't necessarily want to be in the spotlight because someone might feel like embarrassed that they feel their family, right? The pressures, but often it's when they know it can make a difference for somebody else. That's when people, say, okay, I'm willing to step out because I know for every person like myself, there are hundreds of other people that don't even know, right, that there's a potential solution. So I found that's very powerful, is that people are generous, they're caring, and not selfish, People, I think people want to think, oh, sometimes there's an idea, oh, well, shouldn't just people be paying their bills? What's wrong with these people?
Yeah.
Well, the reality is that people that we're dealing with are low income. The math just doesn't work out. That people,
yeah.
It's not a moral decision,
Right.
And we hear that. Like we go with people to their hearings. And this pamphlet that we have a budget in it, right, where people can figure out and write down all their expenses, and then all the money if it's through work, wages, assistance, and our assumption isn't that they're at fault. The reason why we have that in the booklet is for financial literacy. So sometimes people realize it's impossible. It's just simply impossible. They don't have enough. They don't have enough money to pay all their bills. That's the basic crisis, and so it's very important for people to sometimes figure that out, so that way they can educate others. Because the sentiment that it's a moral thing where somebody is deciding they just don't want to pay their bills. At the George Wiley Center, I haven't met somebody that's going to decide, oh, you know what, I just don't care if I get shut off, I'm not going to pay the bill. I haven't come across amongst the people at the George Wiley Center that are low income. It doesn't make sense, but yet that sentiment out there. And I know as far as social teaching,
Yes.
In the gospel,
Yes.
the question is, are we going to focus on the people that are in need, right? What is our role in these crises? Are we going to allow for any problem that exists in society? We can't dismiss the need of people. People are suffering, and we need to be called to actually be with the people that are suffering to try to make the world a better place. And it's not Christian. To me, the core of following Christ is to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit the prisoner, right? So I would challenge people to really reflect when they start getting into that narrative of saying, well, people don't want to pay or they're taking advantage, you know, what would Jesus do? What should we focus on? Even if it's true that they know somebody that took advantage, how about for the hundreds of other people that aren't getting any help, that deserve it? We can't allow ourselves to lose our own caring and compassion and lose our way. Really, we allow the world and selfishness to cloud our vision of trying to work toward a better way. So
the center must have professional financial advisors. You can sit down one-on-one with.
Well, what we do is we go through people's individual budgets, and then we look at the policies. So, for example, the Henry Shelton plan was an example of how can we resolve the issue. Right now, we're talking about appealing to the Public Utilities Commission to get an emergency regulatory change that would allow for people to pay 10% down. So, you know, we come together.
Start.
Yeah, to allow for people to get turned back on, because there's the moratorium, but if you're shut off already, there's nothing in the rules, unfortunately, that is going to mandate if you're shut off on November 1st that you get turned back on automatically. And some people are being told, well, you have to pay 100% of what you owe, or 50% or 25%, and it's too much. So it's a tragedy that you have this protection. The only way we can really kickstart people that are having a financial problem is getting this rule change. So we'll be meeting with the new commissioner to ask for their support to allow for a 10% down deposit, actually year round. That's really what we would like, is to make sure that any time of the year, and we were talking about St. Vincent de Paul, think about how many more people they can help, or the Salvation Army or CAP agencies, if they can spread their resources amongst many people to get people turned back on. And then guess what? Because then they can actually start paying monthly bills again. So we're trying to move to a more humane policy, and it does. It starts with, you know, people bringing in their bill and thinking about, okay, what would be a reasonable payment plan, and how can we make that happen?
Another gem.
Oh yeah, I mean there's so many
God's beautiful
great
jewels. Another one.
Oh, there's so many generous people in our state, and what we try to do is work with different charities and also organize for justice. And you know, there's a analogy. An organizer. Henry had a story about how he became an organizer with an organizer in Chicago that told him, well, you know, you're helping people by going to the welfare department, but really you should be bringing people together. And that, you know, influenced him to start a career of organizing. And so, you know, another analogy of organizing is that I heard from an organizer in Chicago is that, you know, the organizers, we shake the apple tree and the service providers gather the apples. Yeah. So many of the agencies that exist now came out of organizing, right? I think the Interchurch Council that Henry helped start, you know, a lot of different programs came out of people organizing and saying, well, let's come together, let's find a way to help each other. And we really welcome anyone that wants to work with the George Wiley Center. Our number, again, is 728-5555. Thank you again so much for having us on.
So there's a deadline of November 1st.
Yes, please.
So please call this number, 728-5555. Before the deadline. If you're in trouble, or you're impoverished, or you know somebody who is, the meetings are free, free transportation, free child care, free dinner. We're running out of time. Okay, that's about it.
Well, God bless you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's really been wonderful. Thank you.
God loves you, and so do we.